uk. What does pride mean to you? My next guest has seen many changes in his life, few greater than the attitude towards being gay. 91-year-old George Montague from Brighton is an ambassador for gay pride, and last week he received a letter from David Cameron congratulating him on his campaigning work over the years. And he's just published a book called The Oldest Gay in the Village. With Brighton Pride coming up tomorrow, it seemed like a good time to catch up with George Montague and find out more about his extraordinary life. So first, I asked him about that letter from the Prime Minister.
I was amazed. Addressed to me by his own handwriting, congratulated me on what I'm doing, trying to get people to be, which he helped a great deal, more gay-friendly. That's what we need to not understand homosexuality, because I used to ask people to, please try and understand. But then when I don't understand myself, why do I ask people to understand? I now say, please accept homosexuality. I didn't ask to be gay. I was born that way. So there's nothing anybody could ever do about it.
Because there may be people listening right now who still can't accept or understand the feelings that you would feel and others.
Yeah.
Can you try and explain that to us a little bit?
But it's very difficult to explain. It's just the feelings you have, that you can only feel affection and love for another male. I was married with my wife without divorcing or separating. We lived apart for 20 years, but I lived with her for 25 years, 3 children, 3 grandchildren, because you had to live a lie. It was such an aberration in those days, such a stigma attached to homosexuality.
How about the changes in your life then? You said you were married then, so
yes.
You, and because I guess the way that the law was at the time, you were not able to be openly...
It's very difficult to people to understand the stigma that was against homosexuality in those days. It was just horrific. You daren't let anybody have a slightest suspicion that you were gay. And the only way you could do that was to get married. And I'm so lucky because I met a young woman. Well, she wasn't so young. She was a little bit on the shelf. She won't mind my saying that.
Really?
She died 16 years ago now. And I loved her. But it is impossible for a homosexual like me to be in love with a female. I loved her. I love Sumchai. I'm in love with Sumchai.
Who's your civil partner now?
18 years.
You've been married 18, or you've been together 18 years?
Well, we've been civil partner how long? For 3, 4? As soon as we were allowed.
Okay, but you've been in a relationship for 18 years. But
yep.
with your wife, I suppose what will perhaps people maybe think about whether you deceived her all the way through that relationship.
We never deceived her.
Right.
She knew I was gay when she married me. She was friends with my gay friends, and we talked about it. We didn't discuss homosexuality. Nobody did in those days. But I was determined to live a lie and be unhappy, which most of the time I wasn't totally happy. But on the other hand, I found so lucky. I tell people I'm the luckiest, happiest old gay man alive. How come I'm so lucky to find a woman like that? She was 1 in a million. She could have kicked me out and take me to the cleaners. Never. She was my wife till the day she died. And I miss her. I miss her as the grandmother of my children.
Of course you would. Of course you would. Your children, how did they feel about that unusual relationship between you?
I always tell people a little story. When my youngest son was 18, because this is what I promised my wife, if we were lucky enough to have children, I would never leave or separate until the children were adult. And when my youngest son was 18, I think around about his birthday, we had a little meeting. I had talked to my wife and I had decided, convinced her that it would be in her interest, even in mine also, of course, for me to live apart from her. I'm sure that she would find someone, which she did. She found someone, and the last 20 years of her life she was happy with another old age pensioner. They went on holiday together. They went to the meetings and dancing, which they loved. We had this little meeting, and I used a word which I've never used before. I said, "Oh, guys, I'm sorry to tell you, but your dad is gay." My daughter said, "Oh, Daddy, we've known for years."
So, and can you give us an answer as to why that would be that it was never discussed? Why did nobody ever bring that up?
It was such such a thing. You never mentioned it or discussed it. It was a disgusting, horrible word. Homosexuality was a disgusting, horrible aberration. And my son found a copy of the Gay News in my car, and he gave it to his mother, and his mother said, "You better talk to your father about it."
So in the time you were married and you were bringing up the family until the children were adults and you could make that separation, how did you fulfill your natural urges to be with men?
Only once a week. I rationed myself to once a week, and I went out and went to a gay club or went to London sometimes. My wife knew about this, of course.
So you really played a role all this time. That must have been very difficult.
Living a lie. You're living a lie.
Do you consider that a waste of time or something that just had to be done?
No. To be fair, I enjoyed being accepted as a happy husband with a happy family. It was a lie, but that was the lie you had to live. And if you did something wrong or anything, which eventually happened, it shatters the whole thing, which you're very, very careful that shouldn't happen.
And George, how did your life change when eventually you were able to be open and honest with people about the sort of...
I have become, over the last 25, 30 years, I have become by a long way the luckiest and happiest old gay man alive in the world.
And tell me how you met your partner, Somchai.
There's a special pub, fortunately, in London. If you go to a gay bar, and when you're 50, 60, 70, which I was then when I met Somchai, yes, they look at you, what the hell are you doing here? Why don't you sit in your bar chair at home? You're not really welcome. And this is still the same today to a certain extent, but not in Brighton. Brighton is very gay-friendly everywhere. But there's this one pub in London. Shall I mention the name?
Wait, of course you can.
The Quebec, in Marble Arch. Mm-hmm. It is the one pub in London where if you go there when you're 70 or 80, you can talk to lovely men of 30, 40 who only like men twice their own age. And it doesn't apply to only men, ladies as well. Quite a lot of young ladies only like men as a father figure. Right. I don't know why, nobody can explain it, but just accept it. It happens, that it has happened, that it's happened now.
And it's been happening, it's worked for you for nearly 20 years then?
Yep.
At 91, you don't look to me like you need caring for very much. You seem full of it.
Yes.
So you're truly partners.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't...
In every way.
Okay.
Every single way.
Good. So in terms of your involvement in Pride, how's that been over the years?
I felt a bit of a coward because I had come out and never came out as gay to anybody at all, except my wife knew, of course, until my mother died. The day after my mother died, I came out to all my family. I think some that were a few might have suspected or had a few suspicions, I don't know. But no, on the whole, nobody had the slightest inclination that I was gay. I managed to act in a bit of an actor. I suppose I like acting anyway.
So again, you couldn't be honest with your mother all the way through your life?
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Well, there's a little story attached to that. That there was a great friend of mine who was an eminent gentleman. He was the mayor of Maidenhead for many years, and he was charged about the time the Montague Rivers case. And I got very upset. I mean, he was a great friend of mine. My mother knew I was a great friend of his, and she must have suspected. I was upset. I started to talk to her, and she said, "Darling, if one of my sons was like that, I'd rather..." He didn't tell me, and I didn't tell her. And then I got married to please her. Really, I got married to please my mother.
In a way, I know you have your children to show for it, but in a way that's sad, isn't it? That you can't, the one person who you ought to be...
How is it sad?
The one person you ought to be really open, be able to be open with...
In those days.
So perhaps that's how society has changed for the better, maybe.
Oh, the society has changed. I can't describe how much.
George, have you enjoyed writing the book of your life? Because it's been a long life. It's been a life of perhaps some contradictions. Have you enjoyed writing all this down?
25 years of writing it at considerable expense. I published it myself, Somchai helping me because I can't do anything. He's done everything for me. I can't even download an email, but he does it. So we published our own book, but there was a lot of mistakes in it. I left school at 14. My English is not always as it should be sometimes. My spelling, the spell checker sometimes doesn't correct every word, and one or two words weren't quite right. And then we found a lovely lady called Claire, and she works for Blake's, the publishers, and she's done everything. She got Blake's to accept my book. They seem to be over the moon with it, and a wonderful guy that I only spent half an hour with, would you believe? And I would class him as my next best friend in the world, Tim Tate. He phoned me when we were in Thailand. He rang me every week. George, I've got another chapter. He reads it to me. And when he read it to me, I was so embarrassed because he's taken my words as an uneducated man. I never went to I left school at 14, almost illiterate and innumerate. But he's taken my words and he's coloured them and shaped them and made it printable.
Pride, I assume you'll be in the parade again. Do you have a theme for this year? What's going on?
Acceptance of homosexuality, total acceptance of homosexuality, and let's be more friends to old age pensioners and talk, mix with old age pensioners, get them to know us, and then they'll know that we're not monsters, which some of them think we are. And that we're
well, this is your generation you're talking about, so you need to speak to them.
My generation, I know how they think.
George Montague speaking to me earlier. His book is called The Oldest Gay in the Village, and front page, the front cover of the book is George on his mobility scooter in the parade in a previous year, just taken by the Royal Pavilion, because that's in the background, and he'll be part of Pride tomorrow. And so will we. Our reporter Melita Dennett will be following the parade through the streets for my Saturday show tomorrow from 9, so be tuned in for that. It's George Montague speaking to me earlier, and his book, The Oldest Gay in the Village. And your reaction to that, and wonder whether what George was saying to us in that conversation has rung true with you. 03459 570057. And also, can you tell me what Pride means to you? 81333 is our text number. Start your message with radio. BBC Sussex and BBC Surrey, 1023. This Saturday, in the next Rock and Roll Cafe, among the 50s and 60s jukebox records is the one that began in Roy Orbison's sleep and ended up high in the hit parade and in the movies. Then from one, it's music from the 70s and 80s, many you won't have heard for a long time.
I've been driving all night, my hands wet on
the soundtrack to your weekend.
And will you be able to join the Roll of Honour by cracking the Dean Machine code?
Graham Dean.
It starts at midday Saturday with me, Graham Dean, on BBC Sussex.